Hello and welcome to WJTS-Inform. I'm your host, Bill Potter. And joining us in the studio, as he always does on Fridays while the legislature is in session, Senator Mark Messmer, representing this district. And we're going to, now that the sessions have ended, we're going to break this show into two different programs, one that's airing tonight and one that will air next week. Tonight, we're going to deal with budget issues that were passed by the House and the Senate this year. And next week, we'll talk about some of the other issues. So, Senator, welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
I guess we really need to focus on the budget because this is the long session because the budget is the big part.
Yeah, it's the budget year, and it's really our only constitutional responsibility is to pass a budget. I mean, everything else we do, we do as needed, but I mean, or as things pop up. But our constitutional obligation is to do a biennial budget, and this is the budget year. And we wrapped up on April 29th at about 11:55 p.m. So we were supposed to wrap up by midnight, so we made it by 5 minutes.
But I thought, when we talked to you last week, you thought it might be a little shorter than that. That it might be.
It looked like, a week ago, it looked like we could have wrapped up, even a day or two early. But as usually happens in the budget year, if you have, till the 29th at midnight, you're going to take till the 29th at midnight. People just delay getting things, wrapped up. And we had the budget pretty well finished on Tuesday evening at about 9 p.m. And so we could have voted on the budget as early as 9 o'clock Wednesday. But just throughout the day on Wednesday, there was no financial changes to the budget. But there's always things that if it's you can add new language to the budget that you can't do on other bills. Like if you haven't talked about an issue in the House or the Senate, anytime, or it hasn't passed one body. Other bills, just by House rules, House and Senate rules, you're not supposed to bring things, into play, during conference committee time that have never been debated or passed in either chamber. It's not a statutory law. It's rules of fair gamesmanship that we apply to ourselves. But the budget, if you need clarification on something, if you need to add something that either needs some cleanup. I mean, the budget is fair game to put clarification language in from other legislation. So even throughout the day on Wednesday, there was things added in or taken out of the budget that were more statutory issues, not necessarily financial issues. And so that as that was happening, those adjustments probably went until 7, 8 o'clock Wednesday evening till those final adjustments were done. So. That the last couple of days, you go into session for an hour or two, you vote on bills, you go to conference committees, you work on hammering out, final changes. Then those changes have to be approved by the Rules Committee in each chamber, and then you go back to the floor. So you're in session for an hour, out for an hour, back to rules, into session, and that goes on for really a constant process the last couple of days. So. Things really went pretty well overall. So we got done. We were probably done by about 11:45, and then some folks came up to the podium just to give thank you, comments to some of the more key players that were involved in the budget process the last day or so.
So now the budget is passed. It's done. Okay.
Both chambers, bipartisan support in both chambers. So that's always refreshing when you have. Members of both parties support, the legislation. And probably the first time, I think it is the first time of my 4 budget cycles now that I've been through, the first time that the House and Senate, Democrat and Republican, the original conferees on the committee, actually, signed the final budget report. Usually what happens, one of the, Democrat members, or when we were in the minority my first 2 years, the Republican member of the House, somebody wouldn't sign the final product because they felt like they got, they just weren't getting any participation. But this year, the 4 original conferees, signed the report and voted for the budget. So means we did take input from everybody and really have a really good product that we were able to pull together a financially balanced budget that spends about $100 million less than we're projecting to take in each of the budget years. So if there's a little downturn in the economy, if things don't track as we're hoping, that gives you a little cushion for some down months that occasionally happen. Funds, we got $474 million new dollars to K through 12 education. During our last budget, we had approved the highest number of dollars in K through 12 education in state's history. This year we added another pretty significant jump to that. It's about 2.3% more per budget year in K through 12 spending.
Now, when you say budget year, we're talking really, I guess we're talking 16.
It'll start July 1.
2017?
It'll start July 1 this year.
Okay.
And runs through June 30 of 2017. So
okay. For 2 years, because in 2017, at the beginning of that, we're going to go through another budget.
Started again.
Okay.
So.
Okay, go on. I'm sorry, I didn't mean. I just wanted to kind of clarify that so people have an idea how that works.
Yeah, and we got the baseline, the budgeting of dollars per student in the last budget cycle. I mean, it used to be in the range of almost 2-to-1 disparity between some of the urban schools and the rural schools. We've gotten that pretty flat line where the range is maybe $1,000 per school difference from the schools that are getting the most to the schools that are getting the least. I mean, when I started, it was about 6,000. Last budget cycle, it was down to about 3,000. Disparity. This year, the most to the least is about $1,000 difference in any school across the state. And after this budget cycle, that disparity. I mean, we've been transitioning down over a 6-year period through this budget cycle. Coming into the next biennium budget, the baseline dollars per kid will be the same. Okay. So it's been a long process of getting there. But after this budget cycle's done, that transition to base will be uniform across the state.
Is that one of the things you like the most about the budget?
I do. I really do. I mean, because for all the other prior years, I really felt like the small rural schools on the dollars per kid, really got the short end of the stick. Mm-hmm. This year, through across all the schools in my Senate district, every school is getting $150 to $200 more per kid per year. Averaging about $6,000 per kid, and if you just averaged it 25 kids per classroom, they're getting state funding of about $150,000 per classroom of kids. I mean, that's pretty.
That'll help.
Yeah, and then you've got your local funding on top of that of about $4,000 per student. That covers your building cost, your bus transportation cost. We usually allow them to use some of that the property tax money from locals to pay insurance bills and utility bills. We almost always give them the ability to use some of the property tax money to pay other things that are that support the buildings and the buses and insurance costs and things. So probably averages across the district about $10,000 per kid with state and local funding, and so I mean we've made some significant strides in that during my tenure, and glad to see that uniformity getting pretty close this year, and after this cycle, we'll be really closely matched.
What about this budget do you not like or disappoint you?
Probably the one thing that was that ended up in the budget. I mean, the governor had proposed it. We did not put any money into it as the budget left the Senate. It's a project called the Regional Cities Fund. Sounds like a great idea, about $42 million a year. That, to me, as I read, the outline of how that's going to be implemented, it just looks like, and part of the complaint that some of us, conservative-minded folks have had on the federal level, it looks like slush fund money, for this governor or any governor down the road to kind of just put money into renovation projects or parks projects, or I mean, they can kind of pick and choose where they want to put it across the state, and to me it looks like it'll just end up being a slush fund for the governor to use how he wants to spend money where he wants for little pet projects.
Is that, or is something like that put in the budget every time? Or
No,
is
it's first time
Okay.
that's actually been a budget appropriation since I've been there. Now, before I got there used to be a project, they called it the Build Indiana Fund.
Okay.
And legislators got to kind of pick a project in their district every year to put money to for little pet projects, and it got viewed as nothing more than kind of a slush fund for
Kind of like the pork barrel.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. I view that as probably not a lot different. So I didn't really like seeing that in the budget. I mean, that was really probably the one thing that I saw that I thought, why are we going down that road again? A decade ago we decided. It just ended up being kind of just rewarding political friends across the state and.
But economically, we're doing good, so that money,
Well,
it's a little easier maybe to
yeah.
stomach that.
I guess the good news and bad news is
Right.
when revenues are up, folks try to get creative on things like that. Didn't really appreciate that part of the budget, but way more good, than that little unsavory wart, so.
Now, what happens if there's a shortfall? Are there things that will get cut, or is that kind of across the board things?
Usually, at least, for the past few decades, we've always given the governor, if there's a severe drop in revenue, the governor is always given the ability, to cut back on. But we've got rainy day fund, we've got for the schools, we've got a school surplus fund of about $350 million that, if revenues start to drop, we've got some rainy day funds set back that have dedicated purposes. So if there is a downturn, you pull from those first, before you start making folks, cut. But we've in 2008, 2009, 2010, we had about a $2 billion reduction in revenue from forecasted to actual.
Wow.
We were able to, that was my first year in 2009, we had this special session where we had to, we couldn't come to a budget agreement in April, came back in June, reduced what we thought were going to be expenditures by about $1 billion, still ended up with about another $1 billion during that budget cycle short. And so the governor's always given the ability to have different agencies, cut their spending, revert money back to keep the state balanced.
Let's hope that doesn't happen. But then, what happens when there is a surplus?
They can't spend more than we appropriate. If there's a surplus, it just accrues into
Those rainy day funds, or
yeah.
is it okay?
Now if we exceed, if our balance sheet grows beyond 12.5% of our overall budget, that's when the automatic taxpayer refund kicks in.
Okay.
If we go over 12.5% of our surplus dollars.
And I can remember some years
we did that. I think 2 or 3 years ago. We actually had about a 13% or so surplus, and half of that money goes back in taxpayer refunds, and half of it goes into state pension fund, to shore that up. Because we've got most of our pension funds are considered financially sound. The I don't know if it's pre-77 or pre-90. There's a point in some of the some of the teachers that retired, 20 years ago. There's a fund that we put about $600 to $800 million into every year to cover. That one is not considered what they call fully funded, and it'll take us another 15 years to get that one with that kind of extra money put into every year. So when we have the surplus, half of it goes into stabilizing that pension fund, half of it goes back into taxpayer refunds.
Is there anything that the average citizen will notice about the budget that will affect our lives? Much anything, or really everything just kind of?
Well,
like the school's getting more money for their students, being a little more equal. I don't think we'll notice that. It's good to know that.
That'll help solve the tight constraints our schools have been on. But there's some other really good components that are in this budget.
Okay.
We had the IU Med School that's going to be set up, that U of E is going to be, a branch campus, Memorial Hospital, Good Samaritan Hospital in Vincennes, and the Evansville hospitals will all be partners in doctor's residency programs. That we funded the actual medical school buildings. We funded extra money into residency programs for for students that are coming out of the IU med school here, plus students that are coming out of the medical school at Marian University, the osteopaths that are coming out of that program. Over the next few years, you're going to need more residency programs set up. So we funded to allow about another 300 residents per year to be placed in Indiana. So that'll help fill our future medical needs. If you get a doctor to do their medical school and residency here, it's about a 75% chance they're going to stay here.
Okay. And those are things that we'll see in the future.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. An issue that's gotten a lot of attention. There's been some local articles written about it, about helping deal with with mental health problems with folks that are incarcerated. We've got a significant amount of dollars to fund some new, to allow, when you have a local inmate who has mental health needs, money to fund them while they're incarcerated, extra money for mental health and medical addiction, or just a lot of extra money for mental health issues. A couple of bills that help set up the structure for that, and dollars to go with that. Part of the process we changed a couple of years ago in what they called House Bill 1006, that was kind of the resentencing and putting folks back into more community corrections and rehabilitation programs. We've got about $50 million a year, to go back to the county jails to help to do nonviolent offenders and get them more, work release type programs. Funded that up this year, which was part of a couple year process of getting the sentencing guidelines reset to get those folks housed more locally and get them either drug addiction problems solved while they're being rehabbed, get them work release programs to get them retrained. Pretty significant changes that that have been a 2-year process of getting there, that were all in this year's budget. Okay. As part of the school funding issue, not only the $474 million of additional money to fund the schools, but we've got for high-performing teachers, we've got another $70 million a year of bonus money that goes to teachers that are considered excellent, or the two or higher rating classifications of teachers. That has to go directly to teacher pay. It can't. It has to be put in directly to teacher salaries. It ends up about $700 to $800 per teacher across the state of bonus money that they can be given. That has to go to salaries, not to fund any other administrative or sports programs or anything else. That has to be committed to teacher bonus programs. And part of one of our bills that we passed allows half of that bonus each year to be accumulated as their into their base pay. So over time, they'll continue, if they're effective or highly effective teacher, and they qualify for these bonuses, half of it becomes part of their base. So they'll continue to be able to track and get salary increases each year. With the part of that becoming the bonus becoming part of the base, and then bonuses in future years just keeps getting added to that to allow them to step up in their salary year to year, which is good. Mm-hmm. And the majority, I think vast majority of teachers across the state, have been through the evaluation process, which we started a few years ago, and I would expect it to be. The vast majority are ranked as effective or highly effective, which is what I would want and expect in my school, and so this really will help most teachers quite a bit in their weekly paycheck as well. So another increase we did this year, the career and technical education programs. We have $100 million in the budget which was per year, which was the same in prior years. But we've also got through the Department of Workforce Development, we're going to let who used to be Representative Steve Braun, who's now the director of DWD. He'll have another $43 million to allow for, for additional grants and how that'll be set up, and what programs they'll grant extra money to will really be done on a regional basis. So in our area, we may decide advanced manufacturing is where we want to focus, extra career and tech grant money to. But across the state, he'll have the ability, to fund up extra programs for career tech programs at our high schools, and so we've an extra $43 million in the budget for that. So really a lot of good stuff.
Good stuff in the budget. Okay. Well, and next week we're going to talk about some of the other bills that came up this year. All right, Mark, thank you very much for coming in.
You're very welcome.
And join us again next Friday at the same time on 18 WJTS for Inform for part 2 of Senator Mark Messmer talking about items other than the budget that were passed in this year's legislation. Thank you, Senator. Thank you for watching WJTS Inform. We're local people watching local people.